frankly, my understanding of a library and what library sciences in my brain consists of is understanding the Dewey Decimal System, knowing how to put books on a shelf and categorize them properly.
Yeah.
And frankly, that's where it ends.
Yeah.
So, as you said multiple times, this is not professional, although frankly, with what you're doing, with what you're publishing, it could become the professional way to do it.
Yeah. My partner gets so mad at me when I'm like, it's DIY, because he's like, you have a lot of skill sets and you shouldn't say that. but it is very much a untraditional approach to cataloging comics. So I guess that's more what I mean when I say like
unprofessional. It's
DIY.
Untraditional. Yeah.
Yeah. But it is. But again, like we do not catalog according to like MARC standards, and so it is in that way. I would say it's not professional cataloging for sure.
Right. So if we grabbed a librarian from the Toronto Reference Library and brought them in here and we're like, what do you think?
Yeah.
They'd probably like rip their hair out.
Maybe. I have spoken to some librarians who've been really supportive and interested in it, but it would be, I think it's a lot different than traditional classification. So there might be some catalogers who are like a little, I guess, who actually might have some good feedback for us.
Well, yeah,
so if there are any catalogers out there who can help us, let us know as well. Yeah.
For sure. Catalogers, if you're out there, contact Rotem and maybe set something up to help, because all knowledge is good knowledge. Now, with the way you're doing it, like you said, frankly, it sounds like growing pains. They have an old system exists, the Dewey Decimal System, if you will, and again, like I said, I'm a layman, so I'm going to say this all wrong, and it'll probably hurt your brain, but the Dewey Decimal System may fail comics because of how it sets itself up, and it sounds like you're literally just outgrowing that way of thinking to the point where you're taking a genre, comics, the genre, and actually understanding, look, this story isn't actually about a superhero, it's about mental health struggles, it's slice of life, it's autobiographical. So I think when it comes to your work with that, and everyone's work at the library here, I think that goes a long way. Now, as sort of an evolution to this, if sort of the methods here, if it takes over and it's like, ooh, worldwide and it's the thing, right? If you make that next step and your organization helps create that, would the ideal be for 5, 10 years, 20 years from now, whenever it takes over, to be able to walk into a library, go to the autobiography section, and then have, I don't know, cataloged by author, whatever, you'd just see like regular print, old-fashioned Word books, and then a comic and some more books and more comics?
Actually, no.
No? Okay, I love that. Why not?
So my goal, and I know other people involved, would be to, in the comic section, see that breakdown.
Okay.
So comics to still be able to be browsed, like as
a whole, as
section,
comics.
but to have that physical, breakdown, because I think, something that some librarians do is they can choose to catalog comics outside of the comic section, so to take comics and put them in historical fiction or politics or something like that, but that does also segregate them from the comics section, and I think creates a sort of a hierarchy of what comics are considered literary enough or good enough to be cataloged with like real literature, you know.
They're just picture books, they're for children.
Yeah, so my dream would be to go into a library and have people see the scope of the medium of comics in the comics section, and if there are like duplicates, yes, shelve them. get comics in other areas, get people to stumble into them. But I think that also for people who are really in love with comics, to have them in one section is really important as well, because then you can kind of browse, you know, the medium that you love, and so that would be my dream. And then and as you mentioned, there are the way they've been organized, people not seeing themselves represented, and the lack of access to comics, and having, you know, lack of visible representation of marginalized creators, I think makes them inaccessible and makes people kind of stay away from the medium. And there are a lot of misconceptions about comics because of that. like they're all written by men, or they're all superhero, or they're all like the same or similar.
Yeah.
But they're I'm so in love with the medium because they reflect so many different experiences of the world, and there are just endless possibilities in comics. So they're really exciting for me for that reason, and that's sort of why we're trying to do this. Yeah.
I think this is beautiful. I mean, to speak about like sort of how comics are for kids, I for a string of 5 years straight I worked at Chapters.
Me too. For not quite 5 years, but
yeah. I went through, and some of my favorite times were when parents would come up to me and go, well, my kid doesn't like to read, what should I do? And I'd be like, what are you trying to get them to read? And they'd be like, well, I'm trying to get them to read this, or this. And I'd be like, okay, what is it the kid doesn't like? And they're like, oh, it's too much for them. And I immediately go, try a comic book.
Yeah.
Does your kid like the Marvel movies? Does he like Iron Man? Oh yeah. Or does he like Ms. Marvel? Oh yeah. It's okay, cool. Pick up a comic book.
Yeah.
But those are not, literature. I'm like, think about it though.
Yeah.
And really, I got the chance to educate people about the stories that were actually told in these books. And I think this is almost the ultimate expression of that. This is like, hey, by the way, we have a kids section, we have a teen section, and then if you want to read about Mouse, about World War II, you could read that, or if you wanted to read an autobiography, or something like My Lesbian Experience with Loneliness, it happens to be on the shelf right to my left. There's so much different stories, like you've said, and there is so many amazing creators out there that, I think comics is just beyond, it's a section in my newspaper my kid likes.
Oh yeah, and it's a great way to get anyone to read in a more digestible way, but it's also, they can be incredibly complex and challenging in a way that literary prose can't be, or other mediums for storytelling can't be. And so they can, I guess, like push people away for that reason, but they're endlessly fascinating to me because they're like multiple interpretations people can have from reading the same comic, and they're like visual cues that you don't necessarily pick up on, and the way the words and the images juxtapose, and trying to find meaning in the narrative. It's really complex. So yeah, they're fascinating for that reason, and I hope that kids read them for that reason. And I should also mention, we don't, like the public library, we don't censor anything in the collection, so kids can read anything in the entire library space, which is why it was really important for us to put keywords in our online catalog to like mark mature content and stuff like that. But also, if kids do want to sign up, we get parental permission just to let parents know that once kids are a member, I think 13 or younger, they need parental permission. But once they're a member, they can pull anything off the shelf. But I also think kids are really great at self-censoring. So when they're not ready for a narrative, kind of putting it back down. And
whether it's just something too much, they're like, nope. Or they're just not understanding it at that level yet, so it's kind of disinteresting.
Yeah, I guess a good example of that happened a few months ago is that there was a regular who came in on the weekend, a kid, and he would pull comics to read all the time and kind of lie down on the couch and was very vocal about his opinions on comics, which was great. And he pulled, do you know the narrative Beautiful Darkness?
I'm not super familiar with it, but you did show it to me.
Yes, so it's like a large format comic that looks almost like a Disney comic with very cute characters. Yeah, this is Beautiful Darkness that I just mentioned. So at first it looks like a very charming Disney-like book with like beautiful watercolor illustrations. But it actually is a story about very cruel characters and like social commentary, and it takes place, these creatures live around the decomposing body of a girl's corpse in the forest, in an enchanted forest. So it's a very dark horror story actually, but at first it looks very cute. So I think for that reason a lot of people are just kind of drawn to it and pick it up and are like, oh, this is not what I thought it was. But it's one of my favorite comics in recent years, and so this, it's gorgeous too, and it has a very actually uplifting ending in a strange way. But
uplifting.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
I think so anyway. But you can see it's very dark.
Yeah.
And unsettling because it uses such cute aesthetics. But so this library visitor, this boy, kind of picked it up, looked at it for about like 30 seconds maybe, slammed it on the table and shouted, "Boring," and then went and got something else. So it's an example of I think how kids can self-censor if they're not ready for something yet. So yeah.
So that's Beautiful Darkness by, I'm going to say this wrong, Fabien, Vehlmann, and Kerascoët?
Kerascoët or Kerascoët? I'm not entirely sure. But they do a lot of really wonderful work together. I think Kerascoët it's a husband and wife illustration team, I believe. And they've done a lot of like surreal, just beautifully illustrated, but very uncanny and spooky comics that I absolutely love. Yeah.
Perfect. Well, I'll be sure within the links below to have a link to it. That way people can easily find it. And of course, I'll try and have a link right into your database to find that specifically. That way people know it's available at your library.
Yeah, we have it's such an amazing collection. And we've felt lucky that we've had like local zine makers come by and drop off their comics as well. This stand is almost entirely Toronto and Canadian cartoonists.
Wow.
And it's all zines. A lot of them are self-published, some of them are small press as well. So.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's amazing. So I love comics. I'm not super into self-publishing and stuff. So when you say self-publishing, that is like an individual going out, printing, stapling, putting together their own zine, and then small press would be a collective of, I'll say 2 to however many people that would put out a small, maybe monthly or bi-monthly magazine, right?
Yeah, I guess small press could also be just a small-scale publishing company like Old Growth Press.
Okay.
Which is a really wonderful local publishing comics company, and it's co-run by actually CLEOPATRIA PETERSON, and they were one of our cartoonists in residence this year.
Oh, okay.
And they publish in zine format. So I want to see if we have one here. We might not have. Oh yeah, we do. So yeah, this is from yesterday by Natalie Mark. So it's in zine format, but it is from Indie Press. And then there's Diskette Press as well, which is an American publishing company run by Carta Munir.
Okay.
And they publish a lot of zines, comics by trans comics creators. And
Okay.
they're doing really wonderful work too. So we have a few from Diskette Press here as well. But yeah, self-published is generally in zine format and tends to be hand-bound and at the cost to the creator. So generally small runs to sell at like zine fairs or online. And
like TCAF, right?
Yeah, and they tend to be like, they can be passion projects because there's a lot of money and effort and like love that goes into them because it's really hard to make a living from doing that. So,
they don't have the backing of like Penguin and Random House or something like that where you'd be publishing it all over the country and they'd take care of the costs and all that kind of stuff. It's someone putting their own earned money into the process with the goal of selling it.
Exactly, and they can only put in so much money, so only so much gets printed, and you have to think of how much will sell, and so stuff like that. And this is another example. This one is self-published by Jeff Clayton, who is another local cartoonist who actually is, he was a library volunteer here for a while. He teaches kids comics too. He's a teacher, and and they're wonderful autobiographical comics. A lot of people who self-publish also have web comics or have some sort of presence on like Instagram or kind of can be more involved with community in that way. So yeah.
I mean, I suppose it's a little easier to be able to, oh hey guys, you want to read my newest comic? Please check out my Instagram, please check my website, as opposed to, I've now had to create this thing, and I can only make 50 of them or 100 of them. Yeah, I think to speak to digital and social media, it does assist.
It helps with survival and just feeling like you're kind of in it together, and kind of it helps me. Like I post drawings on Instagram, and it helps me to kind of know that there are people whose work I support and who are kind of supporting my work, or kind of, you know, comment on my work, and I'm getting feedback in that way, and it kind of encourages me to create more as well. I mean, sometimes when you're in a creative funk, you're in a creative funk, and there's not much you can do, and you know, life experiences and stuff. But I think having online communities in that way really helps a lot of creators.
For sure.
Yeah.
So we're